All right, we can talk about podcasty things because I have known you now since the year 2012-ish,
Yeah,
correct? That's about 10 years.
yeah,
And when we met, we were both working at the shelter in Brockton.
yeah.
You were a bigwig.
What does
What?
that mean?
I'm kidding.
I
You
thought
were.
I was.
You
No,
thought you were.
they humbled me and demoted me really quick. I was disposable, Dave.
Right. We all are. So my memory is that we like clicked pretty quickly because like,
We did.
you know, because we're cool people.
Yeah.
But like the guests loved you, and for whatever reason that, I know you've shared a bunch of times in your own story, but you got demoted
I did.
and ended up in the Quincy shelter,
Yep. Which
right?
is where I originally started. I started there in '03.
Right. And that's where
Yeah.
you met Jonathan.
That's where I met my husband. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. We were
yeah,
working together.
right. So you got demoted back to where you started, but in a
Not
different
just
different capacity.
Yeah, not just back to where I started, but like I was a supervisor for case managers. They bumped me down to a case manager.
Right.
Yeah.
Incredible. How long was it after that happened that you started to started on the path that you're on now?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I started at the shelter. I needed a job, fell in love with the population, super passionate about the population to this day.
Right.
And I realized like I enjoy talking to people and people enjoy talking to me. And got my master's in counseling, but didn't go for my license because I'm a big wig at the shelter.
You
I'm
thought you had,
excited.
wait,
I
so
thought I
you,
made it.
yeah, okay.
I got my master's. I've been at this facility. I love it. But I joke around a lot about the demotion, but I'm grateful for it because I was very stagnant in my growth.
Hmm.
I did not ever imagine. I admire people who'd be like, yeah, I want to do X, Y, and Z because I just felt like I was where I needed to be. I didn't see myself going anywhere else
Right.
in my career because I'm with people that I enjoy working with. And so after the demotion, I was like salty for a day. The next day, I said, "Oh wow, Celeste, you're disposable. You need to create your own." So that was like the first time the mindset of creating my own got into my spirit was when the demotion happened.
The day after.
The day after, yeah, I said. So then that's when I started studying for my test, and little by little, little seeds was planted in my spirit, and eventually, like I'm here, Celeste the therapist. Never, not you could not have told because even when Dave we were working together, and I had just took in my cousin who's autistic, and I got passionate about working with parents who have children on the spectrum. And
Yep.
I remember Dave like helping me like plan this thing out that I was trying to do. Like at any kind of venture I've been on, I would go to Dave like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Blah blah blah. You've literally been a part of every. I don't want to say crazy idea because they were all good, right? They all led to this.
Yes.
Yeah, every idea I had. But yeah,
Well,
that's how.
I mean, likewise, different though for me. I would say, well, yeah, because when I was talking about planting the church, you were the first person that I kind of went to because I was checking out your new office as
Mm-hmm.
Celeste the therapist. I was like, oh my God. You asked what I was doing. You're like, okay, let's do it. So not only have you been with me for that, but you're the reason I'm doing this right now. Like you, you and a couple other people encouraged me to do a podcast to get back out there. And you've also been with me, I guess the same is true. It's like these new starts that are accompanied by really difficult times, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you were with me through the resignation at the
Mm-hmm.
church. You were with me
Mm-hmm.
through lots of really painful things
Mm-hmm.
and have been like very steady. And
Mm.
that's one of the things I always admire about you, that I always talk to people about around you, is not only like you're an entrepreneur who can do anything that you put your mind to, but also that you don't you don't ride highs and lows in a way that I have. Like you
Okay.
stay through the storms in a way that I really admire. And that's one of the things I feel like in the helping professions, a lot of us,
Yeah.
whether it's pastors, therapists, social workers, you name it, get really outward focused. It's about the
Mm-hmm.
people. It's like, when are
Mm-hmm.
we going to get them to see that they need to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always that rather than what are my needs? What do I need to pay attention to? And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I notice a lot with your podcast, which you've had like you're on like episode 350 something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is incredible. And your books and anything else, you're always talking about your own self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind talking a little bit about that and how that's been so important to you, how it's changed maybe over the years?
Yeah. So when I said I fell into the shelter because I needed a job. And I remember I would go home at night and I would cry, I would write because I would feel so much compassion for these people.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember thinking, if I'm gonna do this work, because I did try to like run away from it. But this is where like I was feeling called to be is to work with people. I recognized if I'm going to do this work, I got to work on myself.
Mm,
I got to start from the inside out. So my mindset around self care, I don't think I never called it self care. I never thought about it that deeply, but definitely um, experiencing the pain that I would feel from helping people led me to understand that I needed to take care of myself first.
yeah.
Um, and I know that people that are, we all have different gifts. There's some people that are great pianists, basketball players, financial literacy people, but they don't do that all day. Their mind is not basketball, basketball, basketball all the time, or piano, right?
Right.
So like, but obviously with the work that I do, I have to be the person to create boundaries and recognize when I need to care for myself. If somebody's shooting basketballs all day, they're gonna get cramps, so they know when to stop, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
my
that's so
self
good.
care, yeah, my self care is really, it's really started to take off tremendously when I went into private practice. Um, I went from working in nonprofit, having coworkers to hang out with, to being in this office by myself, listening to people over and over again.
Mm,
And I recognized that like I needed to really like lean into stillness because I was going to be on this journey of entrepreneurship. And also I needed to make sure that I am well so that I can continue to do work with other people.
yeah. So what does that look like for you? And we were talking a little bit ago about you went for a hike this morning. Like, what are some of the
Mm-hmm.
ways that you are staying on top of that for yourself?
So hiking is like really big. I just recently got into boxing.
Mm,
I've always recognized moving my body is really helpful for me. Listening to things first thing in the morning is helpful. There's most times where I don't want to get up, but I press play. One of my favorite people is Les Brown. He's a motivational speaker.
mm.
Or I'll type in motivation on YouTube and I just listen to it. So like the negative thought that's like, do you really want to get up? Then I'm listening to this motivational video that's like, get up, start your day, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I'm like, shoot, let me get up.
Okay. Okay. I'm getting
So
up.
like that food is important to me now. I didn't grow up
Yes.
understanding about how food plays a role in our wellness. So moving my body, sleep, listening to things, reading things. I always like to name off these free things that I do because I never want people to think financial access is the reason why they can't be okay. You
Yes.
got to start where you are, use what you can. And uh, now I'm able to afford a gym. But years ago, when I started on this like wellness, full wellness, right? I don't want to just do the work and talk the talk. I really want to walk the walk
Yeah.
and not just like have my mindset shifting, but also I want to work on my body because this is the
Mm,
only body I have.
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
would go on YouTube and work out in my living room when the kids went to sleep.
Yeah.
So like I've always been somebody that used what I had and started where I was. I
Yeah.
don't overthink things.
That's so good. And I know that parents that may be listening know how tired they are once the kids go to bed.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that our mutual friend Uli used to say to me when my daughter was young, and I was like, I just don't have time to go to the gym. He's like, no, 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 you make time. What do you do at 5 o'clock in the morning? I'm like, I sleep,
Exactly.
but he's like, if it matters to you, you make time for it.
It's true. It's a sacrifice to wake up in the morning. But you're gonna pay like you can sacrifice. Yeah, sleep feels good. It's not like sleeping extra doesn't feel good, but you
Right.
pay for it down the road
You
when
do.
you know what I mean? So it's really, he's absolutely right. Like we make time for what matters. And a lot of times when we look at what we're doing with our time, we don't matter to ourselves because
Yes.
we're not really doing work within ourselves.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what I follow pretty much everything you post on every platform. So recently you said something about what you do when you first wake up, and you were talking about like if you just pick up your phone and scroll and looking through social media. I
Yeah.
think that has plays a major role in our mental health, the way we start our day.
Yes.
And so when you're waking up in the morning, that looks like you, what do? You
Yeah,
have it all set up?
listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so for today, I got up, I actually listened to some music this morning.
Nice.
The sun was shining, and because I've been doing this wellness thing for so long, my body's like, I want to go hiking, right?
Mm,
Like I just kind of was like ready. I got my water, I got my headphones, and I went out.
nice.
I look at it as my medicine, the same
Mm,
way people work when they don't feel like going to work, but they know they have to pay their bills. I look at living life, doing things that I don't feel like because of what I want to do. I want to live
yeah.
life and not survive life.
Oh, that's really helpful and very challenging.
It's
'Cause-
very challenging.
yeah, it's challenging in a way that when hearing it, you're like, yeah, that's true. I should do that. But we know how much comes through our lives and how much we're responding to life,
Yeah.
rather than what it sounds like you're talking about is not having to respond all the time, but to like proactively
Baby.
know what's coming and be able to then
Yeah.
respond in a way that you feel healthier addressing things.
Yeah. And you know, it's not by accident that these platforms, the internet, created a way for us to stay on. There's this book called Stolen Focus by Johanna Hari,
Hmm.
where
I
he
love
interviews a
Johan
lot.
Hari. Oh,
I'm trying
yeah.
to get him on my podcast,
Oh,
man. Lost Connections was the first book for anybody. Lost
yes.
Connections is a really good book.
Chasing the
And
Scream too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then he just came out last month with a book called Stolen Focus.
Okay.
And he was on a quest to really understand why everyone's on their phones and why we operate in the way we do. And
Hmm.
he was able to take a sabbatical for 3 months with no phones and things like that. But he understands everybody doesn't have access. And he talked to these big wigs and the companies, and they talked about their goal was to figure out how to keep us on. And
Yes.
so, in one sense, I feel like there's a responsibility for systems to create ways for us to understand what they're doing. The same way, like lead paint, he mentioned lead paint at one point was always in people's houses. Now
Right.
people like they've gotten rid of it. And so he also talked about part of our responsibility is to put measures in place. I have screen time on my phone, right? So if I'm on social media longer than 15 minutes, I have to click a button to continue to watch what I'm watching.
Yeah.
After the second time, I'm like, oh no, it's been 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? So that intentional pause that comes into play alerts me that, oh snap, look at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't do that. We just mindlessly do things and not recognize what's happening. We don't even put measures in place. I have screen time on the internet. So I now when I'm on it, it doesn't bring me joy. It's like I feel like I waste time unless I'm doing research or something. I
Yeah.
have a Kindle app on my phone to read.
Nice.
So I put a lot of things in place because there's so much energy in the world that wants us to spend money, wants us to feel like we're not enough.
Yes.
We're in a capitalistic country. And so, because we know this, it's like, why would I not be intentional about my time? Because
Right.
there's so much energies that's pushing me in a different direction. And if I'm not intentional, I'll succumb and I will be in alignment with society. And that's just not what I want for my life.
Oh, that's really helpful.
Hmm.
There, it makes me think about how what we see when we're on social media. So whether you spend your time on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it doesn't matter. What you get on your feed is the most extreme emotions. So you'll right now what we'll get is we'll get the Ukrainian war with Russia, or we'll get the Supreme Court justice being first Black woman being now she got through on the Supreme Court. You'll get those big things. So those are divisive, big emotions. And then you'll get baby announcements, weddings, engagements, birthdays. You have the widest end of the spectrum from
Yep.
one post to the next. If I'm scrolling my TikTok feed, it's holy shit, the world's at war. We might all be at war. And then, oh my God, my friend got, engaged. And how we're supposed to switch in our brains from one of those to the next, I don't think we can quantify what that's doing to us in terms of our mental health. So you're saying to put those sort of, I don't know, maybe speed bumps in place so that you're like,
Yes.
oh, wait, hold on. I can think now a bit about how much
Yeah.
time I'm spending in this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's important. It's really important. And we're over 18. No one's coming to save us.
Right.
Um, it's like
Yeah. Right.
no
Yeah.
one's coming to save you. So I think that a big part of like really living intentionally is writing out what you're trying to live for. What are you
Yeah.
trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Some of us is just going in circles. Don't
Yeah.
even we want more, but we don't know what that looks like. We don't even challenge. We don't continue to question. So
Right.
we got to continue to question and challenge ourselves, and work on things when we don't feel like it.
Mm.
But we got to have that goal in front of us. When that
Yes.
goal's in front of us, like we can do things beyond what we feel like because we're trying to reach that goal.
Yeah. Questioning everything really is a very helpful
Mhm.
standard. You also mentioned what our society does to us in terms of shame, maybe judgment,
Mhm.
the way that we internalize views about ourselves. And depending on the way you grow up, what group you're a part of, that's a different thing for every person, right?
Yep.
But almost across the board, shame comes into play. And I feel like your role as a therapist is to just sort of normalize just who a person is. You're just giving someone the perspective that when they're reflecting something to you, you're reflecting back like, okay, you're not you're not necessarily thinking of them the way they see themselves, which is often like, I'm just this horrible thing, how
Right.
much of your time is spent, and this is my experience in therapy personally. So I'm wondering, not as a therapist myself, how much of your time is spent just helping someone see themselves as not horrible?
It's the majority of the time. I think once people recognize
Okay,
that,
I'm not alone in that. That's good to
uh,
know.
and people will be like, "How do you work with adults?" And adults was once babies, right?
Yeah,
Babies fall, they get up, then life happens, we get boxed in. So I have so much compassion for people that are boxing themselves in
yeah,
and not realizing they can actually release the walls.
yeah.
And so, what I offer for people is normalizing who they are, right? Because
Mm,
we're all different. Our society tries to cast us and put us into this box: heterosexual, married, have a kid, have a car,
yeah,
have a job, right? Like
yep,
they have these categories. And, when we worked at the shelter, I remember when we would go into the woods or when people would
yeah,
get housing, I would get happy for them. And, because people had good relationships with me, some people would be like, I'm not happy about this. I'm going to
yes,
miss community. Or some
yes.
people who choose to be outside. That was like my first time understanding that, wow, like what people want looks different across the board. And it's okay if that's what they want to do, as long as they're not harming anybody.
Yes.
So yeah, that's pretty much, you know, a lot of my time is spent normalizing. But once people are able to normalize who they are and realize like normal is just a dial on the washing machine, their life starts to look different, honestly.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's interesting that you bring up the people getting into housing, because we started to find that people who would get into housing not long after, many would either have
Die.
a relapse or die.
Yep.
And that loss of community is something people in a lot of the sort of being disconnected from what people
Yeah.
experience are just like, well, shouldn't you be happy to be in
Right.
housing,
Right.
and so we receive so much of other people's projections.
Yes.
Not only do we receive it as like this is the way the normal is, we internalize other people's projections as true for us.
Yes.
I know that's true for me. Most of my life I didn't allow myself to see my own needs. and
Mm.
and you're an example of someone that I've always looked to that has been aware of your needs and how you lean into them rather than accepting the projections of culture or anyone else.
Mhm.
What are some things people can do, if they're not maybe ready to, hey, I'm going to get a therapist, what can someone do to start to focus on their own needs before, having, I don't know, I do encourage people to get therapists and seek help, but if they don't feel comfortable doing that, how can someone start to focus on those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Listen to this podcast.
Or are
Maybe some
yours?
of these be storytelling. So that's huge. Podcasting, listening is free.
Yeah.
If for people, in my office space, I have a feelings chart behind me.
Yes.
Um, I believe that we should understand our emotions the way we understand our ABCs. And so for people
That's
that
good.
are not on that ready to like talk to someone, or may not even have the means. Maybe you do want to talk to someone, but not have the means. Start tapping into what you are feeling, right?
Mm,
If you grab a feelings chart, look at it, see what resonates for you, especially when you're struggling. And to say like I feel blah 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 and not I am blah blah blah. So the feelings chart could be super helpful. And let's say you don't have words, you're like, I don't know if what do I feel? Start paying attention to what your body is doing.
yeah.
Our body gives us signs before sometimes logic kicks in. For
Yes.
me, when my back is hurting, if I feel a lot of pressure, I know I'm overwhelmed. I know I'm struggling. Sometimes my stomach turns when I'm anxious
Mm,
or when I'm feeling anxious. And so, like, pay attention to what your body responds to. A lot of us have had so many unmet needs because our bodies are amazing. It does give us signs, but if those signs was always ignored, you learn not to listen to them. Now that we're over 18, no one's coming to save us.
yeah.
We can work on like saving ourselves and working on just paying attention to what's happening within our body. I feel like that's a really great start.
Yeah. And I love that you provide resources for people, whether they're in therapy or not. You mentioned on your podcast that you have a course for people to heal their inner child. In your book, 365 Days of Intentional Living is just a prompt for you to think about something. It has a feelings chart in there. You write, to start your day or to end your day, depending on whatever works for you. There's any number of tools that are available to us. The issue, I think, is that life is so busy, whether everyone I talk to says it. So if someone's 25 and they're single and they're living at home, or they're, just someone I might work with is saying their life is busy, everyone's saying it.
Mhm.
And so it's our responsibility to sort of take that back, right? And to structure our lives in a way. I like the idea that you're over 18, no one's going to come to save you. It's just
Mhm.
the way it is.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be mean, right? And I do
No.
understand that. I do want to preface it by saying that there's a lot of people that have been victims in life. I've
Yeah.
been a victim in life.
Yeah.
And so it's important to recognize the lens that you're looking at your life under.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're looking at it from a victim standpoint because that's what has happened. But a lot of times in the moment, if we look at what's going on in the moment, the thing that's stopping us is that we're living in the past and we're not in the present. And it's hard to move forward if you are living in the past. And so, like, what is your fault is different from your responsibility,
Mm.
right? Sean Marshall, who was on here, talked about in his book. Um, he made it. He said, if the limo driver like hits you, and and he happens to get out to make sure you get to the hospital, okay,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
what happens if that limo driver keeps driving? Do you stay in the street?
Mm,
And so I think about so many people with busy lives and with so much pain that they're holding on to. Because if you don't release it and reconcile with it, you're holding on to it
right.
in different pockets of your system. And you're sitting in the street waiting for somebody to save you, because it wasn't your fault you got hit by that limo driver.
Right.
So it's really important to
Mm,
like grieve, right? Because it's grieving to recognize like what happened or what didn't happen or what somebody did to you. We're gonna
yeah.
grieve about it, but we gotta work on reconciliation. I feel like when we reconcile, like we can actually work on uh, doing the things that we say we want to do,
Yeah.
despite how busy we are. I feel like the using the word busy or saying I can't find time is a cop out,
Yeah.
because we all have 24 hours. It's about creating time. And I would prefer to sleep in, but I prefer to be well as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Especially as we get older, right? Because,
especially as we get older.
yeah, because we don't pay attention to that before our frontal lobes are fully developed. We think we're invincible.
Yeah.
And then as the further we go on, and actually, I've learned recently that the happiest times of your life are near the beginning and near the end. That,
Wow.
like, there's this U curve that at the end of people's lives, they actually are expressing that they're more happy than they've ever been. They've
Wow.
released the rat race. They've come to grips with life in many ways.
The
You know,
rat race. Yeah, like, but okay. And imagine if we can do that like or in the U phase, right?
yeah, in at this curve, because
Yeah.
you and I are, well, I'm in middle age. You're a little younger than me, but it's one of those things that if we can embrace this and stop fearing aging, because it is a beautiful thing, and it is an inevitability. We all do it.
Mhm. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I think perspective becomes the key to everything. It is, how do you look at the situation that you're in? And unfortunately, like myself, you go through things and you've built up so much in life, and then all of a sudden, if you end up in a difficulty, or you have a burnout or something hits you, there's a ripple effect is huge, you
Yeah.
know and that's why it's so important to sort of pay attention to these things when we can, when we're younger,
Mhm.
and to get to that work. I think about, my father. Today is his birthday. He died around 8 years ago, and I think about what he wasn't able to give himself,
Mhm.
because he just did what the boomer generation did. It's just, you go to work, you provide
Mhm.
for your family, you do it this
Mhm.
way, and you just keep going. And he
Mhm.
died very much feeling that, but maybe not being able to express it.
Yeah.
And we now have so many resources that I think it feels like a flood. And I love that you're just saying it's actually not, you don't have to listen to a million different things. It can be a little more simple,
Yeah.
y-
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, we complicate. I feel like we complicate life.
Yeah.
Life is hard, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of pain in life. But the way we live life can actually be very simple. I have a really basic, simple life.
Mm.
I used to post on my personal social media a lot. Someone had messaged me one time and said, "Wow, your life looks so perfect," and it turned me off a lot because
Yeah.
my life is not perfect.
Yeah.
I go through the same ups and downs, the trials and tribulations that other people go through, but it's the way that I live life. I'm able to tap into those resources that allows me to be okay quicker than most.
Yeah.
Because it's like innate. When we're hungry, we go to the refrigerator and eat. We don't need anybody to tell us because our stomach starts growling.
Yes.
And
I
I don't say today, I'm not going to go eat today because I ate tomorrow. Right. And so when I think about all the things that I do, it's a nonstop thing, but now
Yeah.
it just happens effortlessly. And it's very impulsive of me living life and not surviving because now my entire system is just really used to living that way.
I love that. It's just more intuitive. Yeah, you're not, it's not a, I love all your analogies. It makes it so much easier to think about that way. I think about my kids and raising them with this kind of knowledge. And today, we went to visit my father's grave, and my daughter looked at me and she asked, "Are you sad?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I asked her, "Is she sad?" And oftentimes, because I work with teenagers. I'm a teacher. So I hear people say to them, it's okay to be sad, or it's okay to be this or that. I would love it if we could move beyond telling someone that their emotions are okay and that they just know it. I didn't have to tell my daughter, it's okay that you're sad. Yeah, of course you're
Mhm.
sad,
Mhm.
and giving
Mhm.
someone permission is important at the beginning, because sometimes we don't feel the permission
Right.
to feel a certain way, especially helpers. Um,
Well, and if you grew up in a system where if you were crying, it wasn't embraced because you weren't bleeding.
mm,
I think sometimes our caregivers struggle with providing emotional support for us because they didn't have it for themselves, or they
yes,
just never were taught. So many people have talked about, having clothes and food and stuff, but there was something missing, and that something missing was that emotional support. So
yeah,
being able to, we embrace happiness, we embrace joy, but pain we run away from. And
yeah,
it's like pain is a part of life. And so it's beautiful that like our kids are able to experience pain, and we can be there to help them through those humps and not kind of belittle the emotion that they're feeling just because we can't see what's happening. Really
yes.
important thing for parents to understand and do.
Yeah, because there's no way we can be there for them if we're stressed out. I know that when I've gone through hard times, I'm shorter with my kids. I don't
Yep.
want to
Me
be,
too. Me
right?
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing you talked about was this comparison game that we do,
Hmm.
where someone says, wow, your life looks perfect. The system that we need to, I love your focus as a therapist is such that you're working with an individual and working through their needs. And
Hmm.
you also, through your podcast and through other messaging, and through, I'm sure, your therapy, but I'm not sitting in with your appointments, are talking about how certain societal, cultural, familial things infect and affect how we act and think.
Yeah.
So because we live in an ultra individualistic, ultra competitive
Hmm.
culture,
Hmm.
we internalize that and we look at Celeste and we're like, oh my God, I'll never be that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've lost that sense of like sort of unity, and you my sort of my betterment is tied up with yours,
Right.
you know
Right. And it's a picture. That's the sad part. It's like,
yeah,
and my clients laugh when I like, because I could be very comedic when we're talking about hard things,
yeah,
just to lighten it up, because this is sometimes the first time people even talking about their thoughts out loud. So it can be like, I know how hard that can be for people.
yeah,
But the pressures that we put it on ourselves, and I don't like to shame social media because I'm learning about gardening through social media,
yes,
cooking, right? Like I'm learning so much through these channels, but there's time limits. But it's really for people that struggle with the comparison thing. And that's one thing I can honestly say that probably allowed me to continue to go, because I've never felt that way. I feel like I've always been in my own world. So
yeah,
I have compassion for people that do go through that. But when that happens, you got to like cut it off. When I was struggling with infertility,
mm.
I felt like, so when you're struggling with something, you see more of it. So I would see more baby announcements, right? Because
Right.
it's the thing I don't have.
Yes, yes,
Um, and so what I did was I took myself off of social media,
good,
right?
yeah,
Because it was something I recognized that was hard for me. So
yes,
like we're human. So sometimes there may be somebody's life that may be hard for you to see, especially if you're struggling in that area. It's okay to not follow or to mute them, and but don't keep looking and finding yourself struggling. Like it's gonna happen. We're gonna feel jealous, we're gonna feel shame, we're gonna feel like all of these
yeah,
emotions. We gotta understand that we're gonna go through them,
right,
but
yeah.
it's
I,
what we do.
I really appreciate that you mentioned that you cut it off. As someone who is socially conscious the way you are, it matters to you what happens in the world, and that people, like, injustice matters to you,
Yeah.
you know, and it can feel like in our culture, if you're not tapped in through social media,
You're
that
missing
somehow,
out.
yeah, you're missing out, or you're bad because of whatever.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those sort of sick messages that we internalize,
Yep.
that you
Yep.
can actually be a decent human being without being on social media all the time.
Yeah, you can. It's important. We don't have to go with the trends of
Yeah.
life. And if we think about the trends of life, look at life, life is chaotic. All the more reason for you to really look at your life, look at what you need, look at what you're struggling with. There's been people who have taken like social media breaks and they've just had so much less anxiety.
Go
And
figure.
then they, yeah, or they forgot their phone. They were out and vacation, they forgot their phone, and they would say, man, that was the best day, I got to see so much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, imagine if we forgot our phone intentionally. Imagine if we, got off of the internet more often.
Yeah.
The book Stolen Focus, I love it so much, but
Yeah.
they talk about, like, even with Facebook's didn't start off the way it is, where it's continuous feed or one thing leading to the other. The goal is to keep you on.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm talking about my plants or watering it, I get this feed, get something in my feed about it, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, look at the programming happening. But that
Yeah.
was a programming that I'm into. I can see it, and it's something that I really want to do, and it brings me joy. But imagine the other things that you may be struggling with that's in your feed, and it's bringing you so much pain, but you are
Yeah.
opening your phone to tap into more pain.
Well,
Yeah.
because pain, there's something about pain that draws us in too. You know, I can say from my experience of suffering from depression, there was a part of me that longed for the pain,
Mm-hmm.
that would be up at 2 o'clock in the morning, be like, oh, I hate this, but I love it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something addictive about pain,
Yeah.
which is, as someone who's got a full sleeve tattoo, that there's like something we keep going back for when we get tattooed. There is something about pain, and it does release something, a chemical in our brain, right? And it does,
Yeah.
there's something
and
about it.
and it's something that if your system is used to pain, you're going to gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
Someone, I seen somebody on a post said, when you have been so used to having chaos in your life,
Yeah.
having peace feels hard, right? And
Yes.
so we talk a lot about peace and wellness, and in my practice and in my whatever I post, I'm mindful of the fact that, like, you know it's hard to be intentional, it's hard to create peace when you want to run to chaos. So many times when I'm working with people, and they get to a certain place and there's no chaos, and they don't feel right, they feel uncomfortable, and
Wow.
I tell them, looks like you're trying to create some. They was like, wow, like they start to see it clear, like they start to try to lean into it or create some type of thing where they have to be needed, because your system, right? And so I'm
Wow.
really big on systems. And it's so hard if you don't have a circle, if you don't have, I have people like Dave in my life, and my heart goes out to people that don't have an actual person that they can talk to, and they're with these messages, right? That's why I'm like, there's
Mm,
like YouTube, there's podcasting, there's music, there's writing. So there's sometimes where people really don't have community, and it may be hard to tap into it. And so definitely start with you, and tapping into your thoughts. Like that's really like important for me for people to know they're not alone. But I
yeah.
know you can feel alone, especially with the messaging that takes place, in our lives.
Especially now where so much of the communication that we do as people is this way,
Yeah.
is it's online. So you lose the human connection thing
Yeah.
that's so vital for
Yeah.
human survival.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah.
So true.
Okay.
Great
Uh,
point.
why, thank you, Celeste. All right. What do you got going on that's new? You've mentioned the garden thing. I know you got that, that you're working on gardening and learning all that.
Yeah.
What's coming up for Celeste the therapist?
Yeah, just gardening. I'm working on a live show. No,
Hmm.
I mean, nothing, nothing else. Still podcasting,
Yeah.
with like amazing people. But nothing else that I could think of.
Well, the podcast is always new. How often do you release your podcast?
Oh, once a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can always count on it being like really insightful. You have the widest range of guests.
I know.
It's like,
I like the bipolar rabbi, right? And then I'll have a preacher on, a sex therapist on, like,
it's amazing.
um, so because, and now that you're saying this as I'm thinking about it, it's essentially like the idea of like we're all different, right? We come from different
Yes.
backgrounds, and somebody's story can resonate. And I use the podcast and I kind of interject in people's stories to create a teaching moment for my audience,
Yeah.
so that people can kind of know that like healing reconciliation is available to us all, and it could be a hard road, but if that's what you want, then like I really want people to have that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we didn't cover like 98% of what I would want to talk about with you, but
Oh,
if
well,
you
maybe part two we
well,
could do
part
what you
two,
wanted to.
part two, but also for anyone that's listening, you can get so much more of Celeste like from the podcast. You are just constantly offering stuff that I think
Thank
is so
you.
valuable to me, not just through that. I mean, your friendship, obviously, but
I was
for
gonna
those,
say,
I'm saying for the
I,
podcasting world.
so the people that know me as Celeste, like I love everyone, but I just love people that just know Celeste and not
Yeah.
Celeste the therapist. So Dave's
Yes.
that person.